Ernest Holmes wrote in A New Design for Living, "The indwelling God is the greatest single factor in our whole lives. It means that there is nothing between us and God. There is no intermediary. There is no place to go to find God. God already exists in the midst of us, and if we would try to seek God elsewhere, it would be like God trying to hunt for God. God is not lost, and neither are we lost or separated from God. The more completely we are able to see God in everything, the more completely will the one God in all things respond to us." The Dalai Lama wrote in Ethics for the New Millennium, page 46, "Self and others can only really be understood in terms of relationship. We see that self-interest and others' interests are closely interrelated. Indeed, within this picture of dependently originated reality, we see that there is no self-interest completely unrelated to others' interests. Due to the fundamental interconnectedness which lies at the heart of reality, your interest is also my interest. From this, it becomes clear that my interest and your interest, are intimately connected. In a deep sense, they converge. Let us speak our affirmation using the power of the word to co-create a world that works for all of us. I honor the interconnectedness of all life and know that your interest is also my interest. I, therefore, allow God's love to guide me to think, say, and do that which is in the highest and the best interest of us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. So this entire year dedicated to spirituality in action. This is where the rubber meets the road. So here's the thing. We can study and spout all kinds of spiritual wisdom, right? I mean, many of us have studied this for many, many years. And yet, where in our lives are we still holding back on being fully the embodiment of the teachings that we embrace so dearly? And so that's our growing edge, right, for all of us. It's all about being more fully bringing forth that which is within us, that true nature, our God nature, the presence of love and peace and joy and goodwill, forward into all of our relationships. So again, this year is all about spirituality in action. And this particular month, the principle that we are focusing on is oneness. And the value that we are focusing on is seeking the common good, which you can see from our slides and our songs and everything else. And really what's on the walls is that this is an opportunity for us to really bring forward these ideas of what love really is, what compassion really is, into our everyday lives more fully than we ever have before. So today's topic is understanding our interdependence, not our independence, our interdependence. And so this particular concept of interdependence is not something that's just particular to our spiritual tradition. This concept is something that runs through the mystical traditions, the mystical aspects of every world spiritual tradition that there is, whether it's indigenous or whether it's the more established religions. If we look underneath it all, that interconnectedness with all of life is there. Ernest Holmes speaks of this often, and it was so well stated in what Kristen just read, is the awareness that the divine, the same presence, is in all. Everything is an individualized expression of the divine. Everything in the universe, the entire cosmos, is the body of this one infinite universal intelligence that we call God. And again, it doesn't matter whether you use the word God or not. That's what I particularly like to use. But you can say universal intelligence, universal mind, whatever it is, but the idea is that there is one life, one presence, one power that is expressed through all of creation. So oneness. So let's talk about the idea of wholeness and interdependence. Again, Ernest Holmes in Living the Science of Mind said, I am whole within myself and yet interdependent with all things. You ever thought about that? I'm whole within myself and yet interdependent with all things. Thich Nhat Hanh expressed this in a term called interbeing. Interbeing. And again, he said, all things are whole and yet interconnected and interdependent with everything else. And he said that he drew this from Buddha's, Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist. He drew this from Buddha's teachings of something that's called composite reality, or that everything actually is a composite organism. So think of the entire cosmos as one grand organism. And all the individualized parts of it are all whole in and of themselves. We are whole in and of ourselves. And yet we were part of the composite body of God, of the divine, of the whole entire cosmos. And think of our own bodies, how we are a composite organism, that there are friendly bacteria that live within us, all of the individual cells, all of the organs, all of the atoms. Everything within us has a wholeness within it and yet is part of the one composite which makes up our body. The whole thing is pretty amazing when you think about it. So there's an interdependency of all aspects in our own body, right? Everything is interdependent. Everything's working together. So you can see collaboration and cooperation is built right into the structure of our own bodies and in the structure of our planet and in the structure of the entire cosmos. Interdependence is necessary, and that interdependence that is built on love is collaboration, cooperation, and so on. But if things are at war with each other, then what we've done is we've undermined the natural design of the universe to collaborate and to cooperate. So interbeing, I love that term that Thich Nhat Hanh used. All things are whole and yet interconnected and interdependent with everything else. So there is wholeness and interdependence in human relationships, in global economics. These are all the different places, possible places. In the field of quantum physics, there's something called quantum entanglement. There's a whole interdependency there. In the theories of the origin of the universe, in the natural world, that means in the food, all of the food chains and symbiosis between organisms, which we just talked about. And so a really good example that I'd like to use is, I was looking, as I was preparing for the message, I was looking at a bamboo plant that I have on my desk. And so I was thinking about applying this idea of interdependency and wholeness to my plant. So you can see my plant is whole. and it's whole in and of itself. And yet, it is interdependent on the atmosphere in the room, the water that's being given to it, um, the soil that it came from originally, the sunshine that comes in through the window. And then there was the whole infrastructure that got it from where it was originally grown to my desk so that I could enjoy it. That's just one little piece of how interdependent everything is. John Kabat-Zinn, another Buddhist, said this about the wholeness and interconnection. He said, spirituality simply means experiencing wholeness and interconnectedness directly. Seeing that individuality and totality are interwoven, that nothing is separate, that everything is spiritual in the deepest sense. So he says, doing science is spiritual. So is washing the dishes. It is the inner experience which counts. All else is mere thinking. All else is mere thinking. So all forms of life are whole and yet interdependent. So that interdependence then carries into something called social action. The Dalai Lama's book is really all about that. His book that we've been focusing on this month, which is Beyond Religion, Ethics for a Whole World. His intention is to present an ethics that no matter what your religion, or if you don't have a religion, an ethics that all of us can follow in order to be able to live a more peaceful, fulfilling, and meaningful life on the planet. So he talks about interdependence. He said it's a fundamental law of nature. And then he goes on to say even the tiny insects survive by cooperating with each other. And our survival as a human species is dependent then on the help of others, helping each other. That giving and receiving of love is at the core of our very existence. And this is why we need to cultivate, he says, a genuine sense of responsibility and a sincere concern for the welfare of others. And again, I like to bring in things from other spiritual traditions. This is a shamanic point of view by Donna Hines called United We Stand. Happy Interdependence Day. She said, from a shamanic point of view, we are already all connected. There is no such thing as opposing sides. There is only one side. Just us folks here, all just trying to live life as best we can. There is no us and them. There is only us. All of us who occupy this planet, whether organic or inorganic, are the world. All borders and boundaries and separations are pure illusion. And we've talked about that before. When you go out into outer space like the astronauts did, and you look back down at the planet Earth, you don't see any boundaries or borders. It's simply one vast globe of pure beauty. So she goes on to say we are literally part of each other. And we know that too. We share the same air, right? And the other thing that she had mentioned is when we give each other a hug or touch each other, we exchange atoms. So the whole point is that oneness is just simply the way it is. That connection. So do you see then why, or the beauty, I should say, of our vision here at the Center for Spiritual Living Delaware, that we are co-creating heaven on earth. That we are co-creating heaven on earth. We're here to be the presence of love, co-creating heaven on earth. And then the Centers for Spiritual Living, that greater organization that we belong to, which has the overall tagline of that we're here to awaken humanity and create a world that works for everyone. There's this awareness of the interdependence of all life, and that all of us, all beings everywhere, are important. So then, just saying that is one thing, but then the next step is actually bringing it into our everyday lives, to bringing it in to everyday lives as compassionate social action. And compassionate social action can take a lot of forms. One of the forms that I remember that Jenny Stewart wrote about in a recent newsletter article was, rather than driving to work and being miserable, because she had like a 45-minute drive, that she decided to take compassionate action. And so what she decided to do was to see everybody as her buddies on the highway, everybody as her friends. And so she sends blessings to everybody as they go by, or lets them cut in front of her, or whatever. So compassionate action it's just a little slight shift in the way we do our lives that makes such a difference, so that we're showing up as a beneficial presence everywhere. Ernest Holmes says, work without vision is drudgery. That means a vision for a world that works for everyone, etc. But vision without work is self-deception. So it's important to carry our vision of compassionate social action into our everyday lives. Okay, now here's another aspect of it, is interdependence and taking a broad perspective. It's really important to realize that because of the interdependent nature of life, that all kinds of things are converging all at once to make up every single situation. Like all of us that showed up here today, the converging of a lot of different decisions to come here together to deepen into this thing called interdependence. And so here's the thing. If life presents us with a challenge, it's important to take this broader view, because what causes suffering is when we interpret things in a way, we give meaning to things in a way that causes us to suffer. So we want to take this broader, more holistic perspective. And the thing is when we take a broader, more holistic perspective, we are looking at something from a lot of different angles and trying on different perspectives to see what brings us back to a state of peace, because from a state of peace, then we're able to access our creative mind for solution, because our body's relaxed. We're able to allow that flow of creativity to come through. And then we're happier, and when we're happier, we tend to give off a different frequency, and therefore we begin to co-create happy circumstances with everyone else, right? So getting ourselves to a state of peace is so important when we're faced with a challenge. Here's an example. Let's say you lose your job, but then there's a tendency to say, oh my gosh, how am I going to support my family? Oh my gosh, poor me, I will never find a job again. That kind of thing. There's a tendency of the mind to do things like that. And so it's important to catch ourselves, because that mindset causes anxiety, which shuts down the creative mind. It shuts down the ability to access the creative mind and keeps us stuck in a situation where we're so paralyzed that we can't really truly solve the problem. So dissolving the negative meaning then is the way that you stop the negative emotion. And it all happens where? In your mind. So events in and of themselves don't have a meaning. It's the meaning that we project onto them that causes our suffering. It's the meaning that we project. It's the stories that we make up about it. So again, taking a more holistic perspective, we can come up with other ways of looking at it. And we have some, in other words, if somebody loses a job, it could be, wow, okay, so that door's closed, so I can't wait to see what's next. Or only good is coming from this. We've learned some things to say or to tell ourselves in the spiritual tradition to move ourselves out of that poor me consciousness and into the field of possibility and potentiality so that we can move forward. So I'd like us all to take a moment and recall a negative emotion. So recall a negative emotion that you had recently. You can close your eyes if you want to remember that. Everybody recall a time that they had a negative emotion recently? Okay. Then what happened before the emotion? What was the event? So what was the meaning then that you gave to the event or the situation that caused the feeling? What was the meaning that you gave to it? So let's remember that the event exists in the world and the meaning exists in our mind. So give the event some additional meanings. Try to come up with some other possible meanings that it could have. So the important thing is can you see the distinction between the event and the meaning? The meaning is made up in our minds. We have power over our own minds. We have the power to choose. We have freedom of choice to shift ourselves. And the thing is when we no longer buy into the meaning, or when we realize that we just make up the meaning in our mind, we can let it go, which means we can let go of the suffering, the feeling that goes with it. We empower ourselves to bring ourselves. If we want to, we can choose another meaning that feels better, right? We can choose a different way of looking at it that uplifts us. So my whole point of going through this practice, this mental practice, is that the more we can shift ourselves into a place of peace, the more available we are to be a compassionate presence in the world. If we go around with our minds spinning and in misery, it's very difficult to be a beneficial presence on the planet. So this is key. And it's such a simple process. It's just to realize the way in which we layer events with meaning that causes suffering and inner disturbance, that prevents us from really showing up as the amazing, glorious presence of love and light that we are. So everything then that we believe, that we think, that we say, and that we do has an impact because of our interdependence. If we aren't conscious, our unconscious beliefs will rule our lives. So it's up to us to be conscious of our beliefs, our thoughts, our words, and our actions, and to choose wisely so that we show up as compassion, so that we demonstrate what it is that we truly believe, is that we are here to be the light and the love of God here on this planet. And so it is. Amen.